Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 2020 Virtual Brooklyn Book Festival. I'm Carolyn Greer, the co-producer with Liz Koch of the festival, and we welcome you. This is a blockbuster panel coming up, Crimes and Misdemeanors. I've personally been thrilled. I'm waiting to watch it. But I just wanted to say very quickly, there are two important buttons that will be on your screen all the time, and one of them is to buy books. Show the love to the publishing industry and to the authors and buy books. And if you have a little bit of love that you can afford to share also, there's a donate button for the festival. Now, without further ado, I'm going to turn you over to the moderator for Crimes and Misdemeanors, Molly Odintz.
Welcome to the Brooklyn Book Festival's Crimes and Misdemeanors panel. I am the senior editor of CrimeReads, and I'll be your moderator today. I am very humbled to be on this panel because I am joined by three of the crime fiction world's greatest living authors, Lee Child, Michael Connelly, and Attica Locke. If this wasn't a Zoom thing, we'd all be applauding right now. Let's quick go through a little bit of an intro, and then we can get straight to the questions. I always love how Lee Child's bio starts. Lee Child was fired and out of work when he hatched a harebrained scheme to write a best-selling novel, thus saving his family from ruin. Killing Floor went on to launch the New York Times bestselling Jack Reacher series with over 100 million books sold in 49 countries. The Nicotine Chronicles, containing stories by Joyce Carol Oates, Jonathan Ames, Eric Bogosian, Aki Obejas, and many more, edited by Lee Child, is his most recent book. And his upcoming Reacher novel is going to be out very soon. That's called The Sentinel. Michael Connelly is the author of 34 previous novels, including #1 New York Times bestsellers, The Night Fire and Dark Sacred Night. His books, which include the Harry Bosch series, the Lincoln Lawyer series, and the Renee Ballard series, that's probably Ballard, sorry, have sold more than 74 million copies worldwide. Connelly is a former newspaper reporter who has won numerous awards for his journalism and his novels. He is the executive producer of Bosch, starring Titus Welliver, and the creator and host of the podcast Murder Book. And you can find his website at michaelconnelly.com. Attica Locke is the author of the 2018 Edgar Award-winning Bluebird, Pleasantville, which won the 2016 Harper Lee Prize for Legal Fiction and was longlisted for the, oh, here we go, latest book. Sorry, Michael. Okay, back to Attica's bio. Longlisted for the Bailey's Women's Prize of Fiction, Blackwater Rising, which was nominated for an Edgar Award. That's my personal favorite. It has the most unions in it. And it's set in Houston. The Cutting Season, a national bestseller and winner of the Ernest J. Gaines Award for Literary Excellence. She is also a television writer and producer, most recently for When They See Us and the adaptation of Little Fires Everywhere. Her most recent novel is Heaven My Home. Thank you all so much for letting me ask you questions about crime fiction. So I'm going to start with a few quick questions about individual books. Lee, you're here representing an anthology. As someone who once bummed a cigarette from you, I very much appreciate its existence. Why an anthology about nicotine?
Well, because Johnny Temple at Akashic right there in Brooklyn asked me, did I want to do it? And the strange thing for me was that, yeah, I did want to do it. Because previously I'd done the Cocaine Chronicles with Akashic and I'd done the Marijuana Chronicles. But the strange thing for me was I had more trepidation in doing cigarettes than I had in doing cocaine or weed because, you know, in the wrong hands, in the wrong way, those are bad things. But, you know, there's a certain glamour to them. There's a certain story around them. Whereas cigarettes are so kind of quotidian and so kind of disparaged now and looked down upon that I had a severe doubt about should I do it. And that lasted for, I don't know, 5 or 10 seconds. And then I said, sure, let's do it. And, you know, what fascinated me, they are all short stories about smoking, although Joyce Carol Oates did a great one about vaping. But, you know, that's nicotine in there. And they're varied stories, a lot of different approaches. It was a lot of fun to do. Is it the first? Yeah, probably certainly the first I've edited for Akashic. And they make the process real easy. I'm taking the credit for a great anthology, and it's really down to everybody else, not me.
I'm going to say this many times throughout this interview. Anyone who would like to purchase a copy, you can go to the Crimes and Misdemeanors Kindle site. And next, I have a question for Michael. I really loved your latest, and the narrative of someone being framed is definitely one that scares me a lot. What drew you to exploring that plot?
Oh, I think because I haven't explored every other plot. You know, I like that adage they have in law that a lawyer who defends himself has a fool for a client. So I wanted to take that and kind of turn it upside down. And so I put Mickey Haller into a situation where he's accused of a crime, and, you know, he has complete confidence in himself. So he, of course, would defend himself. And I like the idea of trying to draw a legal thriller where the lawyer is stuck in a cell and has to figure out who framed them and build a defense all from a jail cell. So it was just challenges within the form of the legal thriller.
That was what was so much fun about it, was that confidence, because it was like watching a David Mamet movie, except I didn't have to hide under the covers the whole time. Like, I had so much confidence that he was going to come out, and it was all about just how he's going to do that. But one of my favorite things about all three of, so is one of my favorite things about 2 out of 3 of your latest books and one of your upcoming books. There's a lot of real world deadlines in y'all's writing recently, either the election or the pandemic coming up, needing to get your character out of jail before the pandemic happens, needing to solve a crime in Attica's book before Trump gets into power the first time. How do you guys think about bringing in real world deadlines to ratchet up the tension?
Speak to it. I didn't really intend to do that. I had simply left Bluebird in a place where you couldn't come back like a year later. It just didn't make any sense. You could come back a couple of months later. And it took me a while into the writing that I appreciated, oh, these guys are in law enforcement. If we remember, after he was elected, but not inaugurated yet, there was just this rash of violence. And I could appreciate that if you were a Texas Ranger or you were an FBI agent with a conscience, you were like, oh, maybe we better get some stuff done before this fool gets in here. I didn't start out trying to do that. But once I realized it in the writing, I really leaned into the moral quandary that the law enforcement officers were in, that they had genuine fear, that they didn't know what America they were going to get after the 21st on January, 20th on January 17th. 2017, I don't know what I'm saying. It's pandemic brain. You know what I mean.
And now we have even more uncertainty.
I mean, it's getting to the point where most of my books are not in real time, and I always put a dateline because it's too much pressure to keep up with real life. It's hard.
I liked how the upcoming Reacher book is it has an election as a countdown. Were you thinking about that with the timing of the book coming out in the election?
You know, not really. I've got a very ambivalent attitude towards the ripped from the headlines type of story because, you know, that's great this year. But, you know, as you just said, for instance, Michael has got a backlist that is 30 plus books long, and I've got a backlist 20 plus. And hopefully people are going to be attracted to one of them, like the book, and then go back and read the others that could be from 20 years ago. So if you have trapped yourself into, you know, the really important events of 1999 or 2002 or something like that, then that's not going to necessarily make a lot of sense to people reading it now. So it was really a bit of we wanted to do a book that kind of dragged Reacher a little bit more into the modern world, because Reacher is an old-fashioned guy, very Luddite. He sees no appeal whatsoever in.
Finally has to get a phone. It's so terrible for him.
Right, he can barely work this stuff. But we wanted to force him into contact with the modern world. And so the fundamental idea was ransomware. And the election stuff was really a bit of an afterthought. It was just sort of a natural inclusion. And of course, as we get nearer and nearer next month, then it becomes more and more relevant. But I always have this tension about wanting to stay away from the exact issues of the day, because it's really interesting this year. But hopefully, we're going to be able to forget all of this soon. And so to bring it up, if somebody buys a paperback or finds a paperback in the library and they're reading about this ancient stuff, doesn't necessarily make much sense, I think.
Well, I think that's my favorite thing about reading all three of you in a really short time period, was that I kept thinking about how both timely and timeless all of your writing is. And in particular, Attica, I finally found a question I haven't asked you before about Heaven My Home. Was there a little bit of Red Harvest vibe in there?
In what way? In what way?
Because Jefferson is so awful.
You guys, they're never going to let me into that town ever again. Jefferson is as a person of color there. I don't know how to explain it. There's something in the air that makes me, I just feel frightened being there. I just don't, I feel like anything could jump off at any time. And of course, the irony is that I brought my dad with me to Attica Lake to research, because I thought that's where all the crazy people with guns are. And the people in Attica Lake were as sweet as pumpkin pie. It was in Jefferson where I felt like, I don't want to go to the Gone with the Wind Museum. I don't want to talk about Civil War ghosts. No, thank you.
No Confederate flag bikinis.
No. I don't want to wear that. Nope, no, none of that. And there's just such shamelessness about it. There's such a lack of introspection about it that's also frightening.
Yeah, I guess that was why I was getting the Red Harvest vibe time around, because I was like, the whole town is rotten. Like Darren just keeps discovering new layers to it. I've been having fun asking everyone this question in 2020. What do you guys think? Do y'all think crime novels have a role to play in times of crisis and collective responsibility? What's the role of crime novels in the garbage fire of a year that 2020 has been?
To give you a few days of entertainment. I mean, that's really fundamentally the first and foremost thing in my mind. Is this an engaging and interesting and transporting story? That's pretty much it. I mean, the other stuff slips in there, but I think it's wrong to look to crime fiction to kind of answer any of these really complicated problems I think that turn your lens over to something else in terms of fixing the problems that we're in. Crime fiction can comment on them and get you to sit back and think about them, but I don't know that they bear responsibility to fix the problems that are happening in the real world.
I've definitely gotten a lot of comfort personally from reading thrillers, especially this year. There's something about racing to the ends that's so soothing.
Yeah, I think, the great thing that crime fiction gives you that you need is a problem, some peril, but a solution. Depending on how fast you read, within a day or a couple of days or 3 days, you've had this dire situation where people are suffering, but it is fixed. It is fixed a couple of days later, and it's a happy ending. Order is restored. Everybody's good. And that little microcosm of satisfaction and consolation is what people are searching for, because as we know, real life is not like that. Real life drags on and on and on. This year, for instance, is just dragged along at a snail's pace.
No resolution this
year. Nothing is ever resolved. Nothing is ever fixed. Nothing will be fixed. It's real life is terribly unsatisfying. you have this buzz of anger and frustration all the time. And to be led through a story that is dire and terrible and perilous at the beginning, and at the end of it, we're fine, is so reassuring and so nice that people just need it. That's why they enjoy it so much.
Yeah, I think the comment, I mean, you can comment on what's going on, but it can't be the through line of your story. It really is about reassuring and comforting and taking people away. I mean, I think that's the biggest value of what we're doing. But you know, I think it's okay to reflect a little bit on what's going on in the world and how like your characters are persevering, because we're all trying to persevere. And I think that's part of the reassuring nature of the work.
Yeah, and I don't mean to suggest that crime fiction can't be a vehicle to spark conversation about the very things that you're talking about. But I just always think when people look to art to fix systemic problems, no, that's not on us. The rest of y'all got to figure that shit out. That's not on us. But I do think that crime fiction can really provide, in the way that all fiction, frankly, I always say that fiction grows the heart. That I think anytime you're sitting inside somebody's psyche and they've got a problem, and you're trying to figure out how they're going to figure it out, all of that makes you more reflective, makes you more compassionate. All that stuff is great about books in general.
Yeah, I agree with Attica there that it's not up to us to fix it, but in a way it's up to us to record it. And I think that's what's interesting about crime fiction, is that it's like a time capsule. And if in 30, 50 years, people want to know what the world was like around 2020, they can read Michael, they can read Attica. And yeah, we're not solving the problem in the moment, but we are demonstrating it and we're recording it. Really, crime fiction is now the last refuge of socially realistic fiction. It seems to have disappeared largely from the literary world, and we are left to record life as it is actually lived. And I think it will be interesting to look back. We can look back at older crime fiction from up to 100 years ago now, and you get a pretty clear portrait of the society at the time. And I'm wondering whether that will happen with us too. Presumably it will.
Well, and you also get a lot of really interesting interactions between societal attitudes and how crime fiction can challenge those or back them up. And it has such a long history of doing both, because noir has extended empathy to people who have traditionally been denied empathy, but then then other subgenres have been excused of increasing so much empathy for, say, a figure of law enforcement that we're losing it for their client. And then something I was thinking while I was reading Michael's most recent book was, yay, it's great to see defense lawyers get to be heroes again, because they weren't heroes for a long time. Like, what was with that? I don't know why defense lawyers weren't heroic for so long. Or maybe that was just TV. But anyway, it was great to read a defensive or a heroic defense lawyer. So I guess what are, beyond what crime fiction can necessarily change, what are the things that you'd like to see crime fiction exploring more or engaging with in the future?
Well, to speak to your thing about pro-prosecution television crime stuff, I'm married to a public defender who cannot watch any of these fictional shows because it's so pro-prosecution. And the reason is frankly the fact that you can't use the name of these agencies unless you're kind of in cahoots with it. Like, you need their help to actually produce the show. And so therefore there's often an alliance of sorts, even if it becomes unconscious. But just to answer that part about why television can sometimes seem, certainly in Dick Wolf's world and all the Law and Orders and all that, it's all, clearly from a prosecution point of view.
Honestly, I think it works both ways around. I mean, the bad guy being tracked down and punished is a great story, but then so is the little guy sticking up for himself. That's a great story. So defense and prosecution work equally well, I think, in crime fiction. And certainly I love stories where, like Michael's latest, the guy, and that is a nightmare, to be framed by a competent agency is, and to fight your way out of that, that's the ultimate little guy story. And nothing wrong with that at all.
I think there's a big difference, going to your question about pro-prosecution, between what we're doing books and what's on TV, because the book starts with the individual, the writer, and the writer can do whatever he wants, and you're not going to have a publisher think about what you're writing. They're going to accept the book or not. But when you get into TV, there's networks, there's all these things. And, there's not going to be very many networks that are going to want to, do a show about a defense lawyer if the show is going to be realistic and show this person in the trenches who's dealing with people who may have done something but are probably overcharged and so forth. And, the number of purely innocent people is very, very small, the percentage. But they're out there, and people get convicted for crimes they didn't do. And, a network's going to look at that and say, like, how do we sell commercials for this, like, this story that's showing the realistic world? And I think they'll say, let's just do another show that is, shows us catching the bad guys.
I guess alcohol commercials. Michael, is someone who's also been doing stuff with the podcast genre. How does that compare to writing as an individual and working in these giant collaborative teams in television? I guess is podcasting the sweet spot in the middle?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I came to this from many years in journalism, and the podcast to me is a new form of journalism. It's telling true stories, if that's what the podcast you want to do. So after 25 years away, 25 years in fiction, maybe something about our times where the media is not trusted, and there's all the stuff about fake media and enemy of the people. I just felt like telling true stories. And so I chose to do a podcast, and, I turned a closet in my garage and I made it soundproof, and it's definitely DIY. And I make no apologies for the sound and the technical shortcomings, but I think I'm telling interesting stories about people who are persevering, people who are relentless, people who are fierce. And, so I think the podcast can also serve the same function as our books, as comforting and inspiring people.
Absolutely. And this is probably a bit of an overly poetic tangent to go off on, but it seems to me as if you need the story in order to give the truth the proper emotion. And when I'm reading crime fiction, I'm frequently reading crime novels based on a particular emotion I'm feeling. I'm a very emotional reader, as opposed to, I want to read a locked room mystery. I'm like, I want to read something that makes me feel sad, or I want to read something that makes me feel like the world is capable of solving crimes. And I guess I'm curious about how that compares to what you guys look for when you're reading. Do you go for a topic? Do you go for an emotion?
I never read by topic. I think actually what I love more than anything else is reading completely randomly. That's what I first loved as a little kid, where we had almost no books in the house, but we had a library, and the library had a random selection of stuff, and you would go there, and you couldn't really choose. You just took what was there. And I really became addicted to the unpredictability. What was I going to get? What was the next one going to be like? And I regret having gotten out of that, because when you're in the business, you hear about everything. The buzz is all around you. You know a lot of the writers. You're very aware of what's going on. And unpredictability is very hard to find. And so what I love more than anything else is either receiving new authors' books, because they have no track record and I've got no preconceptions, or what I love to do, and in the old days, in previous years when one went on vacation, I would go to the supermarket and buy paperbacks just like a regular person, just based on what they looked like, how did they feel in the hand, what was the blurb like. I would try and select them randomly like a regular customer, and then And I always had plus 25%, a book a day plus 25%, just in case I didn't like any of them. I would take them on vacation, and I loved them. You know, just the wild unpredictability, both in subject and in standard. It was just a thrill to me. I don't want to know. I don't want to choose it on any basis. I want to be given it and read it.
Oh, I love that. Next time I choose what I'm going to read, I'm just going to put a blindfold on and like spin around it 3 times and point at something. It's going to be awesome. Attica, what do you read for?
I think there's something very similar in what Lee is saying in terms of my feelings about a physical book, because I've noticed that buying online, which is all I've really done since the pandemic has happened, and I bought a lot of books. It's not as fun as like actually going in the store and touching stuff and, you know, reading the first line of the book. But, you know, I return to authors that I respect a lot. And then sometimes with them, I don't care what it's about. I'm just, okay, I'll take the jacket off before I've even read what it's about. But it's an alchemy of, you know, what am I in the mood for? You know, it's just an alchemy of everything. I read a ton of mostly contemporary fiction. I'm not a deeply well-read person in terms of like the canon of things that should be read by writers. Not really. I'm a sucker for the production value. I mean, I do judge a book by its cover. I'm a sucker for like all of that. Like, why did they choose this size? It fits in my hand so cutely. Or this cover seems smart and interesting, or dark and twisted. Just, you know, it's about the physical object as much as it's about the author and what the subject matter may be.
Absolutely.
Also,
Lee, go ahead, Lee.
What I love is the writers that I know. In fact, Michael was the last guy that I did anything normal with this year. Before the pandemic started, we saw Yankee spring training in Florida, and that was the last normal occasion. And back then, he will have been thinking about, mulling over in his head, trying to solve a problem about what he was working on. And so you have lunch or dinner with these writers, and then a year later, a year and a half later, you read their new book and you say, oh, that's what you were doing. That's what you were trying to figure out. And in a way, it's like getting a letter from a friend. I mean, obviously it's a story, it's a book, it's a novel, but also the human author is there, the thought processes, the worries, the concerns, and you can piece it together. I remember doing that years ago at lunch with Dennis Lehane, and he was obviously preoccupied with a book. And then a year later, out comes Mystic River. And I think to myself, that's why you didn't pay any attention at lunch. You were trying to figure this out.
Yeah. When I first started working as a bookseller, I was like, wow, authors are people. I can never again just see them as a name at the bottom of the book. Oh, Michael, what do you read for?
Oh, sorry. I didn't know you were waiting for me. Lee's first answer kind of made me feel bad, that thing about the randomness, because that was a big part of my life as a writer. That's probably pretty much how I discovered crime fiction, just kind of seeing what you can find at the library. You know, it was the same with music. I used to just randomly buy 45s, and, you know, when I was a little kid, and that's how I discovered the Rolling Stones. That's also how I discovered like Raymond Chandler. And so you lose track of that, and you become part of this business, I guess you'd call it, and you lose that. You know, I saw we got talking points where we're going to talk about what books we've read lately, and I haven't read any books that anyone's read, because I try to. Again, I'm trying to be surprised. So books come to me. I don't accept all books that come to me, but I that's where I do a lot of my reading. I'll just show you. This is my desk here. Right on my desk, I got the first 50 pages of 5 first novels that have been sent to me, and that's what I'm reading, and hopefully the books are good enough to go past 50 pages, and I'll print out the rest, and then maybe they'll be published in about a year or two.
Aw. That's one of my favorite things about all 3 of you. You're all such good mentors in the crime world. What's something that what's some advice that you would want to give to young authors who are trying to get going in the crime world?
Man, I hate that question because it's a different world than when I broke in. I mean, some things are basic, and it's a cliche. If you're going to be a writer, don't talk about it. Just write every day, and you get better at whatever you do in life. You get better the more you do it. So why wouldn't you write every day? But I can't answer questions like, how do you get published today? It was a different world when I got published. They didn't even have the internet.
I'm thinking of what are the other impossible questions I could ask? Like, what's your favorite book? No one has to answer that.
I think the advice question is actually quite easy. I mean, people say, what is your advice for intending writers? And my answer is, ignore my advice. That is the most crucial thing, because a book, if it is going to succeed, and this is harder than ever now, if a book is going to succeed, it needs a beating heart of its own. It needs to be organic. It needs to be the product of one imagination, which is the writer's. And as soon as you lose grip on that, if you say, I really want to do X, but Stephen King says do Y, and Attica Locke does Z, and Michael Connelly does A, and Lee Child doesn't do it at all, then as soon as you start thinking like that, you're lost. If you want to do something, do it. Believe in it and do it. And if your book, if you are 100% personally happy with your book that you've written, then you are a unique individual, but not that unique. If you're 100% happy, then so will some other people be as well. And if you compromise in any way, if you make it into a committee, if you let the ought to or should words enter your head, forget it. You've just got to concentrate. So my advice is, ignore my advice. Write your damn book.
But I hear, and also in what Leah's saying, is follow your passion, because I've been a professional, I don't know why I'm putting this in quotes, it's true. But I've been a professional writer for 20 plus years, and it's taken me a while to get to a place where, oh, I kind of done some stuff. Like, it takes a minute. But the thing that kept me going through setbacks and this book didn't hit how I wanted to, or this movie didn't get made or whatever, is a fundamental love of the thing, the fundamental love of telling story, a fundamental love of having a writer's life of contemplation and the struggle to get the words down the way I want. I like doing it. I like literally the physicality of a pencil on a piece of paper. Like, you have to fundamentally love it, or maybe don't do it, because there's no guaranteed overnight success. There's no guaranteed any kind of success, but there is pleasure. And if you find tremendous pleasure in writing, keep doing it. That's what I would say.
That's what keeps me writing internet list articles. Tremendous pleasure.
Yes.
Our panel description promised an exploration of the space between guilt and innocence. So let's talk moral ambiguity for a second. What role does it play in the modern crime novel? Do you need ambiguity? Can you have a clear-cut book anymore?
I will say this: the books where I have with Darren Matthews, the last two I wrote, have much more, in my opinion, moral ambiguity than the earlier books. I feel like it's actually because he's a cop, because in order to do the right thing, he breaks he's aware that he has way too much power to fake evidence and do all kinds of things, and it makes him uncomfortable. So that even when things are put back together right, he had to do a lot of ugly stuff to get there. And so in that sense, it's morally ambiguous. Whereas the other books that are like regular citizens caught up in a crime, I feel like there's much more of a sense of everything morally got set in its place by the end of the book.
I think that realistically in real life, it's always ambiguous anyway. People talk about law and order as if it was a thing. In fact, those are two opposing things. The more law you have, the less order you're likely to have. The more order you establish, the less likely you are to be following the law. And so there's always an ambiguity. And what Attica said, yeah, I mean, typically we have our detectives break the law for a higher cause or cut corners for a higher cause, which is refreshing and empowering to the reader who is snagged up in all these technicalities. But it's also, never forget, it's also a metaphor. You know, Reacher hunts down the bad guy, and in the last chapter, he's face to face and shoots him in the head. Now, that is partly satisfaction for the reader, because the reader loves to see a bad guy taken down, but it's also partly a metaphor, because what am I going to do? At the end of the Reacher thriller, the guy is face to face. So if Reacher arrests him, then I got to write a second book, which is the legal thriller about his trial. So in a lot of ways, it is a compression that I believe the reader understands. I think this is one of the really sophisticated things about crime fiction readers, that they understand that when Reacher shoots the guy in the head at the end, that is not actually a textbook example of how we should live. It's almost the reverse. They know they can't do that in real life. They know they shouldn't do that in real life. There's no question about that in their minds, but they love to see it on the page simply because it's just so refreshing for once to solve a problem unilaterally.
That's why crime readers are the most emotionally healthy, I think. Because we can get everything out through the page.
Crime writers as well, you bet. We're the nicest bunch of people. You wouldn't think it by reading the books, but generally speaking, it's true.
And super down to earth compared to the literary crowd, although I like the literary crowd too. But the crime crowd is one of the friendliest communities I've ever come across, and it's been wonderful to get to.
That is true. And I, as one of the newbies here, just so welcoming, just so I've not really had any experience of people treating me in a hierarchical sense, or that there were stripes I needed to earn. And it was just kind of like, you know, open arms, come on in, we're all a part of the same family.
And there's always crossover characters to like come and help out too. Like maybe Reacher could get in trouble, and then Michael Connelly could do a legal thriller where he gets him out of jail. That's just, maybe I write that as fan fiction.
Yeah, Mickey Haller could defend Reacher for shooting a guy in the head.
Oh my God, I want to read this. Oh, and I should let the audience ask a few questions too. Let's see. Ooh, here's a good question. To follow up on moral ambiguity, one of the viewers wanted to ask about how you guys feel about the current prevalence of female anti-heroes and morally complex female protagonists taking over the crime fiction pages.
I'm all in favor. I think that you know, I've been thinking about this a lot, because in this year I've been a judge for the Booker Prize, which is a big prestigious literary prize out of the UK. And you know, we read 162 novels, and first of all had to pick 13 for a long list, then 6 for a short list. And there's a tremendous number of women and also debuts in that. And I in my lifetime, I was born into a white man's world. There's no question about that. But there have been then 2 or possibly even by now 3 generations of women and writers of color demanding access. And what we're seeing is the product of that. I mean, I'm not saying that we're there. I'm not saying that justice has been achieved. There's still an enormous distance to go. But we can pause for a second and celebrate the fact that actually, yeah, women writers are now the best, actually. And give me a choice, I will always read a woman rather than a man, simply because I've read the men before, and the women have got something fresh to say with passion and ideas and energy. It's where the center of gravity is right now. And so in my personal life, all the women I know are morally ambiguous. So it's just pure realism.
Good answer.
I love that.
Same.
Most of the comments aren't questions. It's just people saying how wonderful you guys are and how much they love you.
Yeah, bring it on. We'll listen.
Those comments are lovely. Yeah, thanks.
There's also a lot of commitments to buying the books. Excellent. And everybody who's watching this right now, please go to the Brooklyn Book Festival's website if you're planning on getting one of the books today, and you should be planning on getting many of the wonderful books from the Brooklyn Book Festival that will support the book festival, and also Greenlight Books.
Okay, well, if we have a second and we can talk about two women writers that I just recently read this year that I thought were fantastic. One, this book, My Dark Vanessa, it's not called a crime novel. It is. I mean, there's a big crime in it. That book is fantastic. That's by Kate Elizabeth Russell. So good. I also just read Alyssa Cole, While No One Is Watching. And that was also funny and scary and historically interesting. I just loved it. I'm also super impressed that the books that she writes there's no genre that she falls in. She kind of does everything, which is another reminder that story is everything. It's really everything. So those are two books I super enjoyed this year.
I totally agree about My Dark Vanessa. What a great book that was. Also, Kylie Reed, Such a Fun Age. That is outstanding.
Oh yeah, I've been hearing. Okay, I'm putting that down in my phone.
Writing these down.
Oh my God, I gotta read both of those. When Michael was mentioning that he's just got printed out pages from books, I was like, usually I pick what I'm gonna read partially based on what matches my outfit. But I've been wearing a lot of pajamas lately, so I feel like manuscripts would match my pajamas. So yeah, that would work out well. I just read what's definitely going to be one of my favorite books of next year. It was so good. It's a book called The Other Black Girl, and bringing up the Alyssa Cole book made me think of that book because it blew my mind just as much. Let me look up the author. Zakiya Delilah Harris, and it's so good. I'm already thinking about next year now, and I still have to do all of the end of the year lists. Any other favorites from this year?
I'm doing what everyone else is doing, looking over at this shelf over here.
Yeah.
What I've been interested in is talking to other writers. Is how has this isolation affected them in terms of some people have been kind of paralyzed and lost focus. Some people have been incredibly productive. Other people have suffered from being cut off from the world, being in the soup of language and interaction. How are you both coping with this? And purely in the artistic sense. I don't care about your medical history or I suspect I know your political views, but just as artists, how has it been?
I'm managing. I'm actually not deeply steeped in a book right now. I'm deeply steeped in the Hollywood part of my career. So there is a fantasy that if I were writing a book, I would be more peaceful, that there's something about that singular long form that fits, and it's so deeply contemplative and existential that fits the time that we're living in, but it's simply not what's in front of me to do right now. And I could be wrong. I could be a neurotic mess writing a book right now, but the fantasy is that if I were doing that, it would be a better fit for the pandemic than the running around meetings, deadlines of Hollywood.
I have nothing to complain about. About 7 years ago, when I started writing and producing a TV show, that kind of took over my schedule, and everything, even writing my books, was kind of worked around doing that. And the pandemic shut everything down. So I've gone back in time kind of 7 years to being just a writer who works at home. And so it's been pretty wonderful. So I hesitate to, I know it's been a hard time for many people. So I hesitate to talk about how it's been a great return to what's, I think, most important to me. And so I have zero to complain about.
I will say, for novelists, and it is hard not being at home alone. That is a big, even though I have my own office, there's something about when the kid was at school, the husband was at work for hours, and you were just in the house. It has a different energetic feel that I miss greatly. And I just don't know when I'm getting that back anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's been wonderful for my cat. I think cats are the true winners of the pandemic, and they also have artistic souls. But
I would ask Lee. Lee, did you pick the wrong year to retire, or is it all?
Yeah, I mean, God, it's like going from 60 to 0 on a dime. It's been bizarre. So yeah, this is my transition year where I'm taking a step back. My brother is taking a step forward for the series, and I was looking forward to doing less, but I've done nothing. I mean, literally nothing. I've been in the same house for longer than ever before in my life, even when I was a little kid. You know, you go on a vacation or you get taken to your grandma or something. No, I've been in the same bed for over 6 months, and that has literally never happened. And it's produced a real slow motion feel to my life. And not that I've had a lot to do, but I've been very unproductive. If I do 2 emails a day, I think, wow, that was a good day's work. Whereas before I might be doing 200.
Oh, hashtag goals.
I know, right?
I want my life to be that. I have one really, really quick question from the audience for Michael, and then we're going to be out of time. But I like this question, and it's very easy to answer. Will there be prequel Bosch books? Do we ever get to meet him as a young officer?
I used to say yes, and then I got this idea from Lee about retiring. So I don't know. Not.
All right. Well, it's time to sign off. Thank you, Attica. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, audience that I can't see. Everybody buy lots and lots of books and have a wonderful evening.
Take
Thank you,
care.
guys. Take care.